So the four purusharthas which they have explained here, the first one is the artha, which is the wealth and prosperity. So this refers to the economic values. We know all of us might have learned the Maslow's law of psychological and the physical needs. As we meet the needs in the lower end, we tend to progress upper and upper to meet the higher needs. In the same way, here artha refers to the economic values and the desires we have to satisfy on the psychological, or I can say like the physical level, whatever we want, and all kinds of prosperity for material comfort. And kama is a desire or pleasure, which is through all the five senses that we acquire to enjoy. And dharma has many meanings. One of it could be taken to the doing of duties which are righteous, which are very natural to us. And one of the thing also could be taken of dharma as a tendency or the natural inclination or the natural kind of inclination we have, by the means of which we will be able to get happiness when we do the one that is very natural to us. And moksha are nothing but the spiritual values which are used for liberation. In the spiritual terms, when we talk about moksha, it is the attainment of the samadhi state, which we can say is a liberation from birth and death. But in the modern terms, if you take it and apply it to the normal life we are living, we can take moksha as a state of mind where we experience happiness always. So these four are the main purpose of life. Any action that we are doing would be directed towards any one of these purposes. So one is kama, which is the psychological and the safety needs. The other is artha, which is which belongs to the self-esteem, love, and belonging. So we have to work towards kama and artha. When we work towards them, let's keep in mind that we do it in a dharmic way, meaning we can have desires, but what kind of desires we have should be aligned to dharma, which could be our duties, or which is right, or which could be our natural inclinations. So when the artha and kama is performed in a dharmic way, it will slowly takes us to the path of moksha. So here it is again clear that we cannot lead a life without desires. We need to have desires, we need to have kama, we need to work for artha. But let's work for both of them in a way that it is dharmic, so that the path that we are taking to meet artha and kama will finally lead us to moksha. So dharma, we can take it in the terms of right conduct. Artha can be taken as acquiring the right wealth. Kama is acquiring or performing your actions towards the right desire. And moksha is the right exit. That is the right way to liberate. Most common usages of moksha in the context of the four purusharthas is mentioned in the Dharma Shastras, and moksha is called the Parama Purushartha, or the ultimate goal of life. We don't have an equivalent word in English which we can say which equals to moksha. So to give a near meaning, we say it's liberation, but it's not exactly the closest. That is the closest word we can give, and that's not an exact match. And see, how can we interpret moksha in the modern actions or for the modern life? What do we seek constantly in our life? I'm looking for answers from you. What are we seeking constantly in our life?
Clarity, what we want and how we want to be, or maybe happiness to.
Okay, happiness. Only happiness?
Peace.
Yeah, Lakshmi?
Peace.
Peace, yeah, peace.
Peace and
So, yeah.
fulfillment in whatever we do, the actions.
Okay.
Like satisfaction.
Always want happiness.
Happiness, yes.
Can be through either through monetary gains, through health, or
Mhm.
through some other gain or some house or something. So
Okay.
some way to be happy. So happy is our desire constantly in our life. Everyone
Okay.
wants to be happy somehow.
Yes. So everyone wants to be happy and also peaceful, because just being happy might not give you peace. Being happy might have restlessness in mind. You might be happy like a person who is earning, and earning might be happy because he is getting money, but he might be restless because he has more and more desire to get more and get more. So happiness coupled with peace of mind is what that strikes a balance or gives us a frame of mind where we can last that happiness forever. If there is no satisfaction, or if there is no contentment with our happiness, with whatever we have, happiness plus contentment is what we should actually work towards for. Happiness without contentment will never give us a lasting happiness. That happiness might be there for a moment, and again the next desire comes, and when we run to satisfy that desires, this happiness might vanish. So we can say that we are looking for constant happiness and peace. And what exactly is the cause of this happiness?
We should be like
Satisfaction
satisfied
of
with
us.
whatever we have, then we can feel happy.
Something we have
Yeah.
desired and we got it.
Yeah, it is the fulfillment of your desires. Yes. And why can't you be happy at all times?
Our desires keep changing.
Desires keep changing. Okay.
Happiness is also the state of mind, and every time the state of mind changes, and exactly the desire changes, then state of mind changes, then
Mhm.
that's why we cannot be happy all the times. We can
Yeah, that's
be happy
exactly
all the
correct.
time.
See, yeah. So happiness is a state of mind. It's even though the desires are change also, if the state of mind is in the correct framework, we might not be happy or sad. We cannot be sad also. So it depends upon the mental construct or the mental framework, that happiness. So happiness is the aspect of mind that we experience through mind. When we say how are you feeling happy, we say that I feel, and that feeling comes from our mind. And this who am I is what we had been seeing from previous classes. I don't want to go much into this, because we saw the differentiation between the pure consciousness or the Atman, that is the light, and which through which we have a reflected consciousness, and mind, body, and intellect, the instruments are operating based upon the reflected consciousness. So what is the basis of all spiritual endeavors? It is not opposed to our life, but it is to enhance our life. So when we take up spiritual endeavors, it doesn't mean that we should get stressed, or it should cause a stress in our day-to-day operations. It should be a means through which we enhance our lives. So what does this enhancement give, or what does this moksha that we are saying when we follow right can give us? It can give us freedom from unwanted desires, freedom from anger, freedom from conflict, freedom from hate, and freedom from stress. And if we can get freedom from all this, do you think we can be constantly happy?
Yeah.
And the ultimate purpose in the practical terms could be to be a better human beings. So whatever spiritual endeavor or the spiritual path that we are trying to follow should make us to a state where we slowly come to a mental framework where we get freedom from all these things. When we get freedom from all these things, we become better human beings and we attain moksha. And the modern interpretation of moksha, as per, this is actually the words that I put for myself, because when we say moksha and talk about birth and death, that is a last stage which we don't know whether we will be having a certain mindset at this life to grasp or to go to that level. But to be practical and to attain moksha in the modern interpretation, I always feel that being happy and peaceful constantly throughout our life itself is the greatest achievement. So this simple concept with modern interpretation, we can take it in a way that we can keep moksha as our parama purushartha, and the moksha meaning for us being a constant happiness and peace in our mind. So seeking the true unending happiness, which never changes, never wanes, and never alters, the ultimate truth of life. Does this seem logical to take moksha in the modern interpretation?
Yes.
Yes, Sarita, absolutely.
So any questions in this 4 Purusharthas? Okay. I'm again going back to the combination of this karma and the things that we are doing. So life of a human being on earth. Once Dhritarashtra had asked Vidura as why do we suffer in this earth and what is this life that can be compared to, or why are we entangled so much knowing the ultimate truth? Why are we not able to work towards that truth? So he gives an analogy like that. He gives an analogy here. What all could you find in this picture? Just to see if the picture is clear. What does this picture depict for you? Yeah, there is an elephant. Man is hanging.
on a, yeah, but on the same
Beehive.
Okay.
I mean branch of the tree which will break and he will fall down.
Okay. And what is there on the top
So
of
I
the
think
man?
the man is going to fall down.
Okay.
Yeah.
I could see Lord Krishna on the God in the corner.
Okay.
Lord
And do you see
Krishna is
something on the
blessing
top of
him.
the man?
Beehive, right? Beehive.
Beehive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. There is a beehive and there is a drops of honey that is
Honey.
dropping. Yeah. And which the person is trying to taste it. And you see 2 rats, the black rat and the white rat on the branch of the tree.
And the snakes at the bottom.
Yes.
Yeah.
The snakes at the bottom. Exactly. So this analogy, explanation to this analogy comes like this. They consider the forest as being the sphere of the world that we are in. And this particular branch or tree is the life that a person is having. So the elephant here represents the 6 seasons or the years. And so we can call it as the past karma or the prarabdha, which is because of which this decides how many years we are going to live. And the black rat and the white rat determines the day and night. So these two keeps on eating our age or our life. So as the days passes, our living time in this world gets reduced based upon how much ever time we have. The more days passes, the more we become closer to leaving our body. And the pit, there will be a lot of pits in the forest, and the pits are compared to the future states. Like if you lead your life mindlessly, what will happen when you don't see the pit below, and when you go walking, you might fall into the pit. So it is the same way, the pits represent the falls of human life, and below the trees there is a kind of creepers. Here it's not very clear, but the analogy is there are creepers which have crossed the tree, and the human being is being entangled with that creepers, which are nothing but desires. And humans spend the whole time fulfilling their desires in the same way, like tasting the nectar from the beehive. So ignoring that there is a spiritual path to take, they stay in the whole life fulfilling their desires and desires and desires. And when both the rats eat away the whole branch, what happens? There will be no branch because it has ate away all his time. So he has to fall into the pit, which is nothing but our future karma. So this is just a thought-provoking thing to understand what are we going to do with the life we have. This is the situation we are in. This is the reality that is there in front of us. And how are we going to deal with the life, knowing that this is what is the truth? This is a question, or this is a scenario for every one of you to reflect upon.
Abhita, what
Yeah.
is that honeycomb dripping the nectar is?
See, desire. See, honey is sweet, right? The
Oh.
replication of desire is that we are surrounded or we are bounded with all kinds of desires. And to satisfy the desires, we work. And what happens when you fulfill something? You feel happy, right? That is the nectar that is coming from the honeycomb. And you settle for that happiness.
Why the God picture is in this?
Because we have every person, every life has a spiritual path as well.
Oh, okay.
You can work towards transcending your desires or having the right desires and to go up in the spiritual ladder so that this attachment will not be there.
Okay.
Yeah. So this one is not being even considered by the person because he's constantly busy in satisfying his desires and enjoying the taste of it.
Okay. Got
So
it.
it is a thing that there is a divinity within each one of us always calling to look within, to understand the spiritual significance of who you are, to understand your real self.
Okay, Abhita.
So this was one this race video.
Maybe that fall made her to put more effort and then.
Okay.
The willpower or the confidence which she had made her to push through this.
Okay.
And ability
Never
to
give up,
deal any
always have a
situation.
chance.
Ability to deal any kind of situation, even though you fall, you have decided
Uh-huh.
to run instead of getting back and feeling low or
And how does that
demotivated.
happen? That readiness to face situation comes by mental tuning. Like she is already prepared for that situation. So the fall was unexpected. No one expected that there would be a fall in that race because of someone tripping. She was not at fault. She was the third person to fall if you see in the race. And even after the fall, her main first thing was she was goal oriented. Like she had the framework in his mind. What was running in her mind is to just do her best. That was one thing. And the preparedness for that fall or even that experience that happened. So she was prepared for even the worst circumstances. And how can we say that she was prepared? By the way she came back. There were also other two people who fell. They took a fraction of seconds more than her to come to reality as what had happened, to pick themselves up and run. But she was behind 12 people. And it was really not easy if you have fumbled or if you have gone blank, even for a couple of fraction of seconds here, that she would be able to make that effort to come back, beating 12 people in front of her. So this again comes through the practices that we are doing or trying to learn, where we have to be prepared, and the stress or the sadness or that unhappiness comes to us most of the times because of our unpreparation of the mind to take the outcomes, unexpected outcomes. So this time in Olympics, I think there were a lot of events that could be taken as examples for the importance of mental wellness, as well as examples of sharing, how sharing increases the joy and many things. And this was one thing that I felt I could share as how the preparation of mind to face any situation helps to always do your best. So we will go back to the next shloka. We finished this. Avyaktadini bhutani vyaktamadhyani bharata avyaktanidhananyeva tatra ka paridevana. So here Lord Krishna is telling every creature is unmanifested at first and then it attains manifestation, O Bharata. When its end has come, it once again becomes unmanifested. And what is there to lament in this? So he is telling the cycle of creation and again becoming back as one. So when you take it from the top also, creation is there, and once the creation is there, there will be a dissolution of creation, which again will go back to the unmanifested state. And we have understood that the unmanifested state is a state which cannot be perceived by your mind and the intellect. So it is like the form of Atman, which is like the unmanifested, Then the creation comes, and the creation again goes back to unmanifestation. So this cycle continues and continues. So what is unmanifested at once become manifested after certain time, and what is manifested after certain time become again unmanifested. It's like you have a building, you want to build a new building on that. What will happen to the old building that was there? You have to dismantle, or you have to break down the old building. So at that time, when you see what happened to the building, it was unmanifested. And when you build another building there, now you can see another building. So you can say that that new building has been manifested. So it is the same way it happens to our life as well. So beginning and at the end, all elements remain unmanifested, and only in the middle they are manifested. And if you can take the example of an ocean, the ocean is considered to a Brahman or the Atman or the self, and that self is there everywhere. The ocean water is considered as the self. And when we see the ocean, there will be little disturbances in the ocean, and we also have waves in the ocean. So the world can be considered as the disturbances on the surface of the ocean, and the beings as the individual waves. So what happens here is a wave raises and a wave falls. So that is our considered to be a single life. So the waves manifest and again unmanifest. So when the waves unmanifest, it becomes one with the ocean. You cannot actually see wave, but the ocean is intact. In the same way, the cycle continues. And he further explains that when you take a hilly area, in one season before the onset of monsoons, it will be totally barren. And when the monsoon's outcome comes, when the monsoon comes, it will be very green. And once the monsoon season is over, and after some time in winter, and after that, it will again become dry and barren. So this cycle continues and continues. In either way, it is in unmanifested state or in manifested state. There is nothing for you to lament about. So Arjuna, you don't worry about whether it is manifested or unmanifested, and don't grieve about these things, is the message that Lord Krishna is giving to Arjuna. And here Matthew Arnold is an English poet. He also says that life is an arrow shot from darkness, flutters in the light for a while and vanishes back into darkness. This is again the same thing, that the darkness being the unmanifested and the light being the manifested, it flows into this cycle, and there is no reason for anyone to lament, because it is going on as per it has to happen. And coming to the next shloka, Ascharyavat paschayati kaschidinam, Ascharyavat vadati tataiva chanyaha, Ascharyavat chainamanya shrunoti, Shrutvapyenam vedana chaiva kaschit. So he is speaking now about the wonder. Ascharyam in Sanskrit is a kind of wonder. You can take it like a miracle or a wonder. So he's saying some people wonder or speak about this. Here this refers to the self or Atman. Refers to the self as wonder. Few people hear it as wonder. Though having heard or spoken, no one really experiences this wonder. So this is the thing that he tells. So whatever we have in common is the self that we have seen before. All of us have that life spark or the life-giving material which is common among all of us. And that substance is the wonder, which is that Om here, which is mentioned, which is the Atman, is what here Lord Krishna is telling us wonder. So self is wonder or mystery. Let's first understand what is wonder or mystery.
Something which is beyond our imagination or thinking. Something we see,
Okay.
then we say that it's, I wonder how it is.
Okay. Can you give me an example of what seems wonder to you, or what do you feel is a wonder? Many a times when we go to any nature spots, Will you feel
Yeah,
or get that
exactly.
feeling of wonder when you see it could be Grand Canyon or Niagara Falls or any kind of natural things that you would have visited? At any point of time, did it struck you that how could this have been created, or how could this have been formed?
Yeah, the whole time we stay there, the same thought goes. How is it possible? What is it going on?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Abhita, for
natural
example, for
SSS.
me, right? Yeah, the Taj Mahal is a wonder when I went. And
Yeah.
mystery means this Bermuda Triangle, whenever I see or hear about it, I see that as a mystery.
Yes. So mystery is something that you really don't know the workings of it. We can take it in that way. We don't know the working of it. So for example, let's think that for some time you don't know the concept of electricity. If I come and switch on and you get a light, glowing light on the top of your head, will you think it as a mystery or a miracle? When you don't know the concept of electricity and seeing me, if I even say that it's magic, will you believe it or not?
Yeah, we'll believe it.
Yes.
So because you are ignorant of the concept of electricity at that point of time. Even I can remember my grandmother many a times at that time when we had introduced with the video calls and all, when we show that, it really feels they will be awestruck. What if you just tap here, you will see the person who is 1,000 miles away or 2,000 miles away. Even now, I think this high technologies to the older generations is like a wonder or a mystery for them, because they really cannot think of how things work. Even for us, I think until certain, for our kids, it's totally a different concept. But even for us, I think it would have taken some time to get totally used to this kind of wireless things and all, because we were all grown up in the times of having the normal telephones, then coming back to the normal cell phones and all. So whichever we don't know the workings or the working basis of a particular thing, that becomes a mystery or a wonder to us. So here, what we are talking about as a wonder or mystery is the self. When we don't know how what is the self or what is the reality of the self, till that time it is a mystery. Now we have learned the Sankhya philosophy, which means we have heard about the self, and still we feel that as a mystery only because it's beyond our conception and beyond our intellect, and only thing we have to do is to feel it. So the wonder or mystery, it's like whatever you have told, it's a feeling of amazement and admiration caused by something beautiful. When you see some things, even when I see certain fruits like the jackfruit and all, when you see the inner weavings of the fruit and how inside that, how a flesh is arranged, how fruits comes, they all seems to have like the intelligence of nature, how it is. If we are if you are to make a puzzle of such a fruit, will we be very perfect in making such a fruit with our hands?
No, Abhita.
So such things which are very difficult or impossible to understand and explain. So he here just tells him that this is the wonder which people speak about or people hear about. They all know that this is a wonder, but no one really experiences, because this wonder or mystery can be solved only through experience. And in the last shloka, in this verse of where he says about this self and Atman, he ends in the 30th shloka by concluding, Dehi nityam avadyoyam, dehe sarvasya bharata, tasmat sarvani bhutani, natvam shochitum arhasi. So again, Sochitu is like grieving. So he again says, therefore, tasmat is therefore. So he again says, don't grieve. The self of all beings within the body is eternal. This is again the repetition of whatever he has said earlier, and it cannot be harmed. Therefore, don't grieve. He is just summing up whatever he has told in the previous verses and giving again the same instruction, not to grieve, but the one that is eternal and non-destructible. Any questions?